welcome to our channel. We're thrilled to have you here for another incredible story. Before we dive in, we'd love to know where you're watching from, so drop a comment below and let us know. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss tomorrow's powerful Royal Guard story. Trust us, you'll want to be here for what's coming next. Thank you for joining us, and let's get started with today's unforgettable tale of courage, discipline, and duty. Your thoughts and comments mean the world to us, so feel free to share them anytime. A drunk father throws a stroller at a royal guard. You won't believe how the guard responded. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Buckingham Palace, where a large crowd of tourists had gathered, cameras in hand. The grand historic walls of the palace seemed to whisper secrets of centuries gone by as people marveled at the beauty of Britain's royal heritage. The meticulously manicured gardens framed the scene, their vibrant flowers and neatly trimmed hedges adding splashes of color to the otherwise formal setting. Amidst all this, one figure stood out more than any other: a royal guard, Sergeant Chris Williams, aged 32, in his pristine scarlet tunic. Sergeant Williams was a picture of discipline. His brass buttons gleamed in the sunlight, polished to perfection, and his bearskin cap, nearly 18 inches tall, added to his imposing presence. The ceremonial rifle rested precisely against his shoulder, his gloved hands betraying no tremor, even after standing still for nearly an hour. His face remained stoic, as expected from the British Royal Guard, a living statue of professionalism. Though outwardly still, Sergeant Williams was acutely aware of his surroundings. His training allowed him to detect any potential threats in his peripheral vision, while maintaining the flawless focus expected of him. In his 3 years of service, he had endured everything from silly dances and jokes to harassment, but he never lost his composure. He had woken at 4:30 a.m. that morning, meticulously preparing his uniform, polishing his boots to mirror-like perfection, before reporting for duty. His discipline was unquestionable, his commitment to his role clear. However, today, the crowd was particularly heavy. There were school groups, tourists from all over the world, and British citizens showing their relatives around the palace. Security staff worked tirelessly to manage the flow of visitors, gently reminding everyone to stay behind the barriers. But amidst the peaceful hustle and bustle, no one could predict the disruption that was about to unfold. As the crowd grew, Sergeant Williams remained steadfast, eyes straight ahead. But his calm was about to be tested, and he would have to rely on more than just discipline to navigate the situation ahead. The serenity of the moment was about to change, and it would test not only his training, but also his ability to react under pressure. What happened next would shock everyone, especially when a drunk father's outburst challenged the very essence of authority and composure. The crowd around Sergeant Chris Williams continued to swell, and the tension in the air became palpable. Despite the growing noise and movement, the Royal Guard stood unshaken, his expression as impassive as ever. But in the distance, a figure began to emerge: Jack Miller, a man in his mid-30s, stumbling toward the restricted area, dragging a double stroller behind him. His bloodshot eyes, disheveled appearance, and the unmistakable scent of alcohol made it clear that he was far from sober. He moved unsteadily, his arms flailing, and his voice loud as he shoved his way through the crowd. The tourists around him exchanged uncomfortable glances, sensing the man's agitation. His children, a young boy and a little girl, sat in the stroller, their faces filled with embarrassment and fear as their father's behavior spiraled out of control. Private Sarah Reynolds, a nearby tour guide, stepped forward, her voice calm yet firm. "Sir, please stay behind the barrier. This is a restricted area." But Jack Miller wasn't listening. His face flushed with anger as he pushed the stroller closer to the red rope, slurring his words. "You know how much this trip cost me?" he shouted. "My kids need to see this. We didn't pay all this money to stand in the back." His words grew louder with each passing moment, making the surrounding tourists shift nervously. Sergeant Williams kept his posture rigid, his eyes focused straight ahead. Though he had seen disturbances like this before, something about Jack Miller's erratic behavior felt different. Sergeant Williams's training had prepared him for disruptions, but this man's volatile actions put both his children and the crowd at risk. He remained calm, carefully watching the situation unfold in his peripheral vision. His years of experience told him that this could escalate quickly. The father ignored the staff and the pleas of his children. "Dad, please," the young boy whispered, pulling on his father's sleeve, clearly terrified by the scene. But Jack Miller wasn't hearing his child. His temper flared as he shoved the stroller closer to the barrier, violating the rules and disregarding the well-being of his children and those around him. Sergeant Williams knew the situation had gone beyond a simple disruption. It was no longer just about discipline. It was a potential danger, and he would have to act soon. The situation was quickly escalating. Jack Miller was beyond reasoning now, his anger boiling over with every step. His words became more slurred, his movements more erratic, and Sergeant Chris Williams could feel the weight of the tension in the air. The children, Ethan and Lily, looked more frightened by the second, their small faces a mixture of confusion and fear. Private Sarah Reynolds stepped forward again, attempting to de-escalate the situation. But Jack Miller was too far gone. "You think you're better than me, huh?" Jack Miller yelled, stumbling towards Sergeant Williams, the stroller still dangerously close to the barrier. "You're just standing there doing nothing while I'm trying to give my kids a good experience." His voice cracked with frustration as he pushed past onlookers, his body swaying with each step. Sergeant Williams remained perfectly still, his expression unchanged. His training had prepared him for moments like this, but this was different. The tension was palpable. The father's aggression felt threatening, and the children's distress only made things worse. The guard's training told him that his priority was to keep control of the situation while ensuring the safety of everyone nearby. But it was becoming clear that it was only a matter of time before this volatile situation turned dangerous. Then, it happened. With a sudden burst of rage, Jack Miller grabbed the stroller and hurled it toward Sergeant Williams. The metal frame, heavy and sharp-edged, flew through the air with terrifying speed, aimed directly at the guard's chest. The crowd gasped in horror, some pulling their children back, others scrambling to get out of the way. A warning shout from the onlookers rang out, but Sergeant Williams had already calculated the trajectory. Without flinching, he moved with surprising agility, breaking from his rigid stance in a fluid motion that no one expected. In an instant, Sergeant Williams caught the stroller midair, just inches from his body, the impact reverberating through his gloved hands. The crowd stood frozen, their collective breath held. Cameras flashed, capturing the scene as the Royal Guard, unshaken, set the stroller down gently beside him, as though nothing had happened. The drunk father staggered back in disbelief, and for a brief moment, the entire crowd was silent. Sergeant Williams didn't waste a second. His eyes never left Jack Miller as he assessed the situation with calm precision, fully aware of the danger still lingering. The moment had been intense, but the real test was still to come. Had no intention of letting this situation spiral any further. The crowd stood in stunned silence as Sergeant Chris Williams set the stroller down gently, his hands still gripping the metal frame. His expression remained as stoic as ever, but inside, his instincts were razor sharp. Jack Miller, still swaying on unsteady legs, gaped at him, disbelief written across his face. The drunken rage had dissipated for a moment, replaced by a mixture of confusion and fear. The crowd watched, phones still recording, as the Royal Guard's unexpected movement defied all expectations. "Who do you think you are?" Jack Miller slurred, his voice shaky, but still filled with venom. His hands clenched into fists again, but this time there was hesitation. Sergeant Williams remained perfectly still, his eyes focused intently on the father. His training had prepared him for such moments, moments where discipline and authority had to come to the forefront, not just to protect himself, but to protect everyone around him. Before Jack Miller could take another step, Sergeant Williams moved. His boots clicked against the pavement with purpose as he stepped forward, closing the gap between them. The crowd seemed to hold its breath, unsure of what would happen next. Jack Miller lurched forward, swinging his fist wildly in a drunken rage. But Sergeant Williams was ready. He sidestepped with practiced ease, his movements fluid, calculated, almost effortless. In an instant, Sergeant Williams took control of the situation. Using his training, he executed a textbook restraint maneuver. flipping Jack Miller to the ground with swift precision. The father, still disoriented and enraged, struggled beneath him, but Sergeant Williams maintained control. One knee pressed firmly against Jack Miller's back, while his gloved hands secured the man's arms, ensuring that he could do no more harm. The crowd, who had been murmuring anxiously, now burst into applause. Sergeant Williams' voice rang out, calm and authoritative, as he called for security. "Get this man away from the children," he commanded, his tone unwavering. The children, Ethan and Lily, still watched in wide-eyed shock, but their expressions began to soften as they saw the situation come under control. Despite Jack Miller's protests, his slurred threats and pleas were drowned out by the sound of approaching security. Sergeant Williams didn't acknowledge him. His eyes remained on the children, ensuring they were safe. His duty wasn't just to stand guard, it was to protect, and that's exactly what he'd done. The crowd, once filled with tension, now relaxed, witnessing firsthand the unbreakable discipline and power of the Royal Guard. As Sergeant Chris Williams maintained his firm hold on Jack Miller, the chaos around them seemed to settle. Jack Miller, now subdued and on the ground, was panting heavily, his drunken slurs still escaping his lips, though his anger had mostly evaporated. His fists, once raised in violent rage, were now clenched in frustration, but he was no longer in control. The crowd that had been tense and fearful moments ago began to murmur in awe, the initial shock of the altercation giving way to a collective sense of relief. Phones continued to flash as people recorded the unfolding events, but now there was a sense of respect, even admiration, for the guard who had stepped in and diffused the situation so decisively. Sergeant Williams, ever the professional, didn't break his focus. His knee remained firmly pressed against Jack Miller's back, and his grip on the man's arms was firm but measured. The situation had been intense, but it was under control now. The father's threats were becoming increasingly pitiful, his voice cracking with fear. "You don't know who I am," Jack Miller rasped, his words growing less coherent with every attempt. "I'll have your job for this. I'll sue." But Sergeant Williams didn't flinch. His training had prepared him for moments like this, where words, no matter how threatening, held no weight against the authority he had been sworn to uphold. His only concern was the safety of the children, who were now standing nearby, trembling. Ethan and Lily, once paralyzed with fear, were slowly starting to settle down, their wide eyes no longer glued to the man on the ground, but to the calm, composed figure of the guard who had protected them. "Don't worry," Sergeant Williams said softly, his voice carrying over to the children. His demeanor was still rigid, but there was a softness in his words that reassured them. "You're safe now." A police officer arrived, his voice cutting through the stillness as he approached to take control of Jack Miller. With practiced efficiency, the officer placed the father in handcuffs, though his protests continued. Sergeant Williams stepped back slightly, allowing the officers to handle the situation. The crowd began to disperse, the tension slowly ebbing away as the tourists, some still recording, continued on with their visits. Yet, there was a new sense of respect in the air, a realization that the Royal Guard wasn't just a ceremonial figure, but a protector, ready to act when it mattered most. Sergeant Williams turned his attention back to the children. They were no longer crying, their small hands now gripping each other in a comforting gesture. The woman who had helped them earlier was now guiding them toward the security staff, who would ensure they were taken care of. The guard's gaze softened as he watched them walk away. It had been a difficult moment, but he had done what he had been trained to do, protect and serve. As he resumed his position, standing tall and immovable once again, the crowd had quieted. The tourists who had witnessed the whole scene now saw something different in Sergeant Williams. No longer just a figure standing at attention, he was now a symbol of real strength and resolve, ready to face danger head-on and do what was necessary to protect those in need. For him, duty had always come first, and today it had meant more than just standing still. It had meant saving lives. We'd love to hear your thoughts on what happened today. What do you think about Sergeant Chris Williams' actions? Do you believe he was right to break protocol and intervene in that dangerous situation? Jack Miller's behavior was certainly out of control, but was it the right call for the Royal Guard to step forward like that? How would you have handled the situation if you were in his shoes? And what about the children, Ethan and Lily? It's heartbreaking to think about what they witnessed, but it's comforting to know that someone like Sergeant Williams was there to step in. Do you think the intervention was the best course of action? Or should he have stayed at his post, regardless of the situation? We want to hear your perspective. Drop a comment below and let us know what you think. Have you ever witnessed an outburst like this in a public space? How did the situation get handled? We're always eager to hear your stories, insights, and opinions on these real life moments of bravery and duty. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you enjoyed this video. We have plenty more extraordinary stories from the Royal Guards and other moments of incredible courage and discipline. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on the next story coming your way.